Now, the Black Knight satellite is considered the tip of the iceberg when it comes to conspiracy theories. I mean, since I was a kid, I have already heard stories about this unknown object that is supposedly floating 1,000 miles or so from our exosphere. Until now, this fascination remains the same, despite the fact that the major facets of this mystery have apparently been debunked already. There are already hundreds of YouTube videos dedicated to the exploration of this conspiracy theory. So, at first, I had this thought that making another one would just be pointless. But I then came across several articles that somehow sparked my interest again in the Black Knight satellite. So, let's dive into this enigma, shall we? First thing first, allow me to give you a quick rundown of this story. Take a look at this picture. This is an image captured by NASA way back in 1998 during its first space shuttle mission to the International Space Station. In the photo, you can see that there's an unidentified object that somehow features a metallic structure. And unlike common space debris, this one has a distinct shape, like those spacecraft we see in sci-fi movies. Right immediately, the space agency has labeled this unidentified entity as item STS-0-88700-2466. But it was not classified in the same line as UFOs or similar sightings. Instead, it was cataloged as space junk that floats in Earth's low orbit, or a distance of approximately 1,200 miles. There was this astronaut named Jerry Ross, who was also part of the first space shuttle mission. Ross stated that the unidentified object was just a wayward thermal blanket that got loose while his team was attaching an American module to a Russian module on the ISS. Similar to other NASA explanations about unidentified sightings and phenomena, this statement from Ross is far too convenient. I am not a subservient, but I do know the fact that the government isn't 100% honest with us, especially with sensitive matters like extraterrestrial and covert missions and operations. So it's not surprising that a significant number of people believe that the Black Knight satellite, similar to other space conspiracies, is real, that this object is artificially made by aliens or ancient species and has been on Earth for 13,000 years. So what's really the truth about the Black Knight satellite? To be honest, the facts and fallacies about the Black Knight satellite are convoluted into surly bonds, which formed into a story surprisingly cohesive enough to stand on its own. Interestingly, the foundation of the story was grounded in the discoveries of Nikola Tesla. During his radio experiments in Colorado Springs in 1899, Tesla noted that he received radio signals coming from space. Despite the scientific genius of Tesla, he theorized that these signals came from Martians who were trying to communicate with us through numbers, since numbers are universally understood. In fact, he had recounted this discovery in an article published in Collier's Weekly, where he said the following:
"The changes I noted were taking place periodically, and with such a clear suggestion of number and order that they were not traceable to any cause then known to me. The feeling is constantly growing on me that I had been the first to hear the greeting of one planet to another."
I don't know if it's coincidence or by intention, but these findings by Tesla were used by Black Knight believers as the first proof that the satellite was real, and that it was the one that sent the radio pulses, not the Martians. But before you join their bandwagon, it's important to highlight that scientists have already debunked this claim. Those pulses captured by Tesla are most likely those naturally occurring signals emitted by space objects while they are within our orbit. Specifically, it is believed that what Tesla heard are pulsars, or those distant celestial bodies that generate regular radio wave pulses. So, while I like to entertain the idea that aliens or extraterrestrial satellites are the ones responsible for those pulses, in the end, I still incline myself toward the explanation given by scientists because they are more plausible. Of course, the supposed Black Knight could also have emitted those pulses, but that doesn't conclude that such an event is already proof that the satellite is real. After all objects in space can emit those pulses, even if they aren't really alien in nature. But it's also fair to acknowledge that many theorists speculate that radio pulses are the preferred medium of alien communication, and that these pulses are the ones used by aliens to reach out to us. This belief took a solid hold when, in 1927, a ham engineer radio operator and civil engineer, Jorgen Hals, noticed an unusual activity from his radio signals. When he transmitted these signals from his home in Oslo, they returned to him after a short while, which surprised Hals. After that incident, he assumed that this phenomenon was caused by aliens, as how could those signals return to him if they weren't mediated at all? Almost 50 years after the incident, an article published in the Analog Science Fiction and Fact gave an explanation as to what caused the signal echoes that were received by Hans. Duncan Noonan, the author of the said article, said that there's an object orbiting around the moon that is behind the long-delayed echoes. While others didn't think about it, at that time, Duncan put his faith in the idea that the long-delayed echoes were generated by alien objects. This is what he said.
The changes in the long-distance echo patterns in apparent response to changes in the outgoing signals from Earth really do look like the responses of a Bracewell probe, and there is still no satisfactory natural explanation for the phenomenon.
This statement is referring to a hypothesized autonomous spacecraft designed to communicate with other civilizations. But there's a problem here. After all, those long-distance echoes have stopped appearing in 1975. So, how did Noonan explain this? Well, here's what he said.
If a probe was monitoring Earth rather than trying to attract attention, perhaps it belatedly discovered from the 1973 to 1974 publicity that it had given away its presence in the 1920s and pulled out in 1975. That's the only explanation I can see for its apparent departure.
But despite all these explanations, Noonan himself said that his findings had nothing to do with the Black Knight satellite. So, wait a minute. Did you see how he pulled back? This is proof that Noonan had retracted his initial statements about the connections between the long-delayed echoes and the Black Knight satellite. How did I know that? Well, because in 1998, he attempted to plot these mysterious echoes, and apparently it gave him a star map. Yes, you heard it right, a star map.
I tried plotting the delay times against the order in which the echoes were received, and at only the second attempt, I found what looked like a star map.
The star map, according to Noonan, pointed to the origins of the mysterious sender. Specifically, the probe came from the solar system of Epsilon Boötes. Furthermore, based on his computations, Noonan concluded that this mysterious object that came from Epsilon Boötes has been around Earth for roughly 13,000 years. But where did that 13,000 years come from? Well, the explanation Noonan gave to it was quite murky to understand, but it has a lot to do with the positioning of the Polaris, or the North Pole star. That doesn't sound like a sound science, right? Well, that's because that's really the case. It has been a laughingstock in the science community, and after the multiple criticisms he received, Noonan admitted that it was his outright error, and since then, he tried earnestly to separate himself from the Black Knight hodgepodge. Let's think for a moment. It's definitely difficult for the Black Knight satellite to stay in orbit for 13,000 years. The fuel required to do that would be enormous, and given the perceived size of the Black Knight satellite, it should not have enough space to store large quantities of fuel. Of course, there's a possibility that the satellite could be using a more advanced propulsion system that we aren't aware of yet. But right now, it's pretty unlikely that it would be the case. However, long-delayed echoes aren't the only boat Black Knight satellite believers are riding. In 1960, Time magazine published a story that mentions how the U.S. Navy was able to detect an unidentified satellite orbiting the Earth. At that time, the United States government believed that what they found was Soviet spy technology. Eventually, they dismissed that this unidentified satellite was just a broken-off piece of the Air Force Discoverer 8, which was one of the earliest photo reconnaissance satellites of the United States. But skeptics believed that this was just a cover-up, and that what the Navy found was actually the Black Knight. Of course, we also have to include the story of Gordon Cooper. Cooper was a trained astronaut for the United States, and he had multiple space trips already. So, this guy was not a joke. According to the ARMA Observatory and Planetarium, Cooper made a report that he saw a UFO while riding the Faith 7 spacecraft, which was a part of Project Mercury. And when he supposedly saw the UFO, it was already his 15th orbit in space. This report is a big deal for Black Knight believers, as they think that what Cooper saw in Faith 7 is nothing more than our famed satellite. And they are really banking on this proof. After all, Cooper is a trained pilot and had enough experience to discern what's identified and what's not. Unfortunately, Cooper's personal recordings and NASA's transcripts disproved these claims. But that's not the end of the story, though. You see, in his autobiography, Leap of Faith, Cooper has recounted his multiple experiences with these UFOs and the supposed cover-up of the United States government for these UFO sightings. One of the most notable of them was the first UFO he witnessed in 1951 while he was flying in West Germany as an Air Force pilot. Alongside individuals who are trained to see experimental aircrafts, Gordon saw a strange-looking saucer-like aircraft that did not make any sound while landing or taking off. Despite the stories of Gordon Cooper, he strongly denied that he saw something strange or foreign during his Mercury missions. So that alone signifies that the Mercury 9 stories are all made up. Still, Gordon Cooper was adamant until his death that these UFOs are real, and the United States government is doing its best to cover information relating to their true nature or origin. With the evidence presented here, I am inclined to believe that the Black Knight isn't real. However, this doesn't mean that I don't believe in the things that our government is hiding away from us, and it is our duty to demand answers from them. With the recent revelations about these UFO sightings, it seems that we are starting to crack the walls that keep us from knowing the truth. But on the flip side, I still fear that all of those statements made in the US Congress about these UFOs are nothing more than a grand disinformation campaign. Alice Gorman, a space archaeologist from Flinders University in Adelaide, Australia, said that there should be more space conspiracies than what we have right now. After all, when you direct a powerful telescope into the vastness of space, you will probably see things that you couldn't explain. And if you spot an object that you can't identify, that should spark your imagination to go crazy. Meanwhile, multiple space agencies, including NASA, have their respective catalogs of the space debris they discover or encounter. But it's safe to assume that their records are incomplete. At the same time, we also have to factor in the possibility that these space agencies don't share information with one another. These are some issues that prevent ordinary folks like us from getting the real picture and knowing whether or not we are dealing with something alien and sentient. I have no problems if you support the existence of the Black Knight satellite. That's your freedom, and you are entitled to believe what you want. It's also our job to be inquisitive and demand our governments to be truthful to us, as we have been craving for answers for far too long already. In fact, it got to the point where many people don't really care anymore. And for me, making people indifferent about the things that are happening in this world and beyond is the biggest conspiracy that there is. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this deep dive, please subscribe to Beyond Life. I know doing these things is a chore, but with those little clicks, you can help our channel grow and allow us to produce more value-oriented content just like this. That's it for now. Stay safe and see you in the next one.